Usually I don't give a tremendous amount of credence to exit polls. Kamala Harris commanded that stage. Harris needs to get voters to back Harris and not just oppose Trump. And what might be more important is what we're telling our sons, which is it's okay to name call girls. It's okay to think this way about women. And that's how we've stayed in this vicious cycle. She needs to just reclaim the narrative. The Latino vote went overwhelmingly in the favor of Donald Trump. I mean, Harris still won it, but she won by 8 points. Biden won that by 33 points. So what happened there? Also, New York City, 1/3 of the vote in New York City went to Donald Trump. In New Jersey, Harris only won by 5 points. These are wake-up calls to staunch blue Democratic areas. She was exquisitely prepared for this debate. And I think that this is a bigger message for a victory for women. I mean, take politics away from this for a moment. We're not talking today about whether or not Kamala Harris commanded that stage or whether or not she exhibited leadership skills. We're saying she won that debate.
What are the 2 sentences she needs to convey to the voters out there?
She needs to talk about the fact that border crossings are lower than they've been since 2020. She needs to take over the narrative and talk about how Donald Trump torpedoed the bipartisan bill that would have helped immigration on the border tremendously. She needs to just reclaim the narrative. If I were advising Harris's campaign, she needs to separate herself from Biden. She needs to get out there more in these battleground states, do every interview possible. In that New York Times poll that came out over the weekend, 60% want change from Biden. However, only 25% think that's Harris. 58% think that's Trump. The one thing in the CNN polls that I thought was incredibly interesting, to your point, Ashley, was how many people are still undecided. There's been a 14-point swing from President Biden to Donald Trump amongst Gen Z young men. And why is that? Because Donald Trump is speaking a lot about machismo and masculinity and these disenfranchised young men who don't see hope in their future and in the economy. They're now saying that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. Yeah. All of the focus groups said that they loved what they heard from her, and they finally got a chance to know her and how she felt about policies, but they wanted to know more. Yeah. And this is why I've been saying that she needs to do more local interviews in the battleground states. She needs to get into a little bit more specifics on some of these policies. I know her aides don't want her to do that because there's a risk in doing that.
They should do them.
But they should do them. I do think this was an interesting strategy today because up until now, the messaging with Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney together has been to save democracy, that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, which has been rising in the polls as an issue that's important to voters. But this was a really interesting wrinkle today to go to abortion. You know, and why is that? I mean, were they noticing in interior polls that maybe that wasn't resonating with independents as much as they wanted it to, and they thought that maybe abortion has a much better chance of attracting women? Very interesting change today. In a deeper level, I believe that the strategy of the Trump campaign right now is to go full red meat to the MAGA base. And this is what they want to hear because that will be turnout. There are very few undecideds left right now, and they would have to be watching every news cycle to hear things like this and be offended by it. So I think the strategy right now is full court press, say all the offensive things. There have been no repercussions. Get out the MAGA base. Turnout will decide this election. I think Elon Musk will go down as the single most important and influential person in the Trump administration. He is in charge now of the information flow with X, or misinformation sometimes. He is in charge, as we saw with what's going on in Ukraine. He's basically in charge of the entire communication system over there, so it lives and dies with him. He's basically going to be in charge and influencing every aspect of the government. I'm going to tell you who should be the pick, and that is Senator Joni Ernst. And she's having reservations right now, and here's why. She's a veteran. She's a sexual assault survivor, and she has a history of voting against people who have sexual misconduct allegations against them. She would be a slam dunk victory for President Trump. And I've heard through the grapevine that she's number 2 on the list.
Your word of the year, Gretchen Carlson, you start.
Miscalculation. On the border, the economy, abortion, young men, Latinos, the Israeli-Gaza situation, the influence of podcasts in our culture, the threat to democracy polling high, except that it was not just Trump who was a threat, but apparently Harris. The polls, miscalculation, which I believe should lead to reflection.